All right, we are recording. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you live. My name is Rebecca Thistlethwaite. I am the director of the Niche Meat Processor Assistance Network. We're a project of Oregon State University that serves niche meat producers and processors and their associated supply chain by providing education and technical assistance. So this morning, we're going to be sharing a webinar on understanding the key diseases of hogs for producers and processors. We won't be covering every single disease, just some of the hot and trending ones right now. And we are pleased to have a star audience of speakers here this morning. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves and give short bios as well. Because their experience is lengthy. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and pass the mic off to Dr. Michele Pfannenstiel. Michele, take it away.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. And thank you so much to NMPAN, Oregon State University, and Cooperative Extension for hosting this incredibly important webinar. We're very excited to be here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get us started. So we are here talking about exactly what Rebecca was saying, because we've got a whole lot of things coming about that people need to be super aware of. So with that, what I want to do is I want to introduce our panel that's going to be talking. And let's start with you, Dr. Holck. Give us an intro and let us know who you are, and then pass it along.
Sounds good, Michele. Thank you. Yeah, Tyler Holck, veterinarian. Swine veterinarian, serving our industry for the last 30 plus years. And about a year and a half ago, was asked to serve as coordinator for the U.S. Swine Health Improvement Plan. And so we're going to share a little bit about that later in this call, but happy to be here. And I'll turn it over to, looks like Giovanni's next on my screen to introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Giovanni Trevisan. I am currently a research assistant professor here at Iowa State University and serve as data management and epidemiological support to the U.S. Swine Health Improvement Plan.
Excellent. And Jordan?
Yeah, hello, everyone. My name is Jordan Kraft. I am a program extension and outreach at Iowa State University and with the U.S. Swine Health Improvement Plan. I got a master's degree in veterinary preventative medicine, highly focused on PDV in 2017, and I've been with the lab now almost 8 years.
That's amazing. Boy, I practically have PTSD from PDV. So hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Michele Pfannenstiel. I'm the CEO of Durago Food Safety and the founder of Food Safety University. You see me contributing on the NMPAN listserv. This is not my first rodeo on NMPAN webinars. And I'm here because as part of my work and my business, I feel like it's really important to connect to small producers and processors to the larger conversations that my veterinary colleagues are having around diseases that affect us too. So you're going to hear a lot about these sorts of diseases, and it's really important that producers and processors are talking to each other, because if you've ever done an on-farm slaughter with me, you know that I say you miss more by not looking than by not knowing, and you will definitely hear that again in this presentation. And when you're a processor and you are seeing animals come in, we need for you to know what to look for, because processors concentrate, right? And lots of farms come into the processors. And what we're talking about today, it's so important that we have your eyes on the animals as well, because you're the final eyes on those animals. And you can be looking out for some of the things that we are talking about. Okay, so with that, what the heck are we talking about today? All right. As Rebecca said, we are not covering all of the diseases. So we as veterinarians classify diseases into, we have viral diseases, we have bacterial diseases, and we have what are they called? parasitic diseases, right? Then there are non-infectious diseases like injury, that's a really big deal for people. So we're going to be covering these, what we call transboundary diseases, emerging diseases, so that you can have an understanding of why these are important and what to look for. And then we're going to talk about the particular production practices that we have. And this is a key part. And I really want to hear your questions when it comes to this, because I'm not going to lie, most of the research is not done with producers like us. Okay, I have talked to, my vet school and said, hey, let's come out when I'm down in Georgia. So I went to UGA for anybody who's interested. And there are farms that I work with in Georgia, and I invite the professors on trucks to bring the students out. And they're like, why would we want to do that? And we want to do that because our portion of the production world is an important portion. We make a lot of money in, per animal, per head, even if you don't, feel like that all the time, in comparison to a lot of the commodity worlds. And it's important that we're all talking to each other, because you'll hear this again, these diseases really do not care about your zip code or your production practices. They will blow through your herd, and it can be very devastating. And then finally, as Dr. Holck said, I'm going to pass it over to them, and we're going to talk about some of the ways that we are organizing to address these issues. Okay, so what are the diseases that we're looking out for? Well, we're going to start with the one that everybody is talking about. Okay, now when I was in vet school, I spent 6 weeks or so at the Plum Island Animal Disease Research Center out in the middle of Long Island Sound, and I got to take a boat to work every day. It was amazing. And we studied this. I've seen hogs, as probably all the other panelists here have seen hogs in real life, what it looks like with African swine fever. And you've heard about it in the news. It is... we have already caught it, is my understanding, and y'all pop in here, at the border in Miami. And we're all really very worried about this. Okay, this is a disease of profound economic implications. And this is what it looks like. You're, kind of how I remember is your hogs turn purple and have, those really high fevers that hogs can get, and we're like, looking at our rectal thermometers, and we're like, really, does it really go up that high? And they're profoundly sick. And all of these diseases have acute phases and all these different things. But if you are seeing these blotchy skin lesions combined with high fevers, and some of these respiratory signs, you really need to be calling someone. And if I'm the only veterinarian that I'm very easy to find on social media. Okay, and I think Rebecca probably has my cell phone. So if I am your only resource, then call me and I will find you veterinary infrastructure in your county or state to help you with this. That is how important this is. And no, I'm not going to charge you. Okay. So then I want to talk about classical swine fever. So we've never had African swine fever in the United States, and we're hoping to keep it out. We have had and did eradication of hog cholera or classical swine fever. In African swine fever, the pigs are a little more red. In classical swine fever, the pigs, as I have seen them, are a little more blue. And kind of the classic lesions that I was taught is blue around the ears. And so processors, what can happen is people can drop a load of hogs off, and then you will notice in your ante-mortem inspection, or the inspection that happens before the hogs are slaughtered, that they're blue around the ears, and they're not moving. We can have some neuroscience, knuckling and stumbling and that sort of thing. And you need to be super aware of that, okay? Because it can, as I was taught, and you guys can hop in on this, this can be a little, as subtle as anything in a hog gets, a little more subtle. I'm fond of saying hogs are not particularly subtle about anything. But this is also one of these things where if you're having reproductive failure on your farm, you need to know this. Okay, this has to be somewhere in your brain, which is exactly why we are doing this. Okay, so that's classical swine fever, right? And then we have the one, this is a really insidious one, okay? Porcine reproductive and respiratory syndrome, or PRRS, okay? And this goes everywhere. Not only does it go everywhere, and we're about to show you some more information on that, but you can have it and not know it, right? And be a spreader and be a spreader farm of it. Classically, it looks exactly what the name says. You have respiratory problems and reproductive problems. It's really, named for a reason. But this is one of these economic diseases whereby you're just producing a lot less, right? But in order to understand that you're producing a lot less, you have to know what you are producing. So as we look at some of these solutions, a lot of this is going to give you the data to understand what is normal and what is not normal, and that's where we always start. So Dr. Trevisan, I believe you have some information to share right here. So let's get that up and let's start talking about PRRS and what we've got with PRRS.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be here presenting and discuss a little bit more. So can you confirm that you can see my screen? Okay, perfect. So the idea was asked to provide this information about the swine disease that we need to know. And I could not start that without saying that we need to have some source of available information. And we have from the veterinary diagnostic laboratories in the US, there is a collaborative work that goes through Iowa State, University of Minnesota, South Dakota, Kansas, and Ohio, where they share diagnostic data in an anonymized way about disease detection and some specific agents like PRRS, the detection by PCR. So this is an open source information that's available for all veterinarians, producers, interested parties, that you can get access to this information that's currently housed at Iowa State, but it's really a collaborative event. So when we look for what's the disease that are more frequent in swine, and this is a chart from Iowa State where these are confirmed diseases in tissue case during 2022. And you can see that we have a variety of agents, and PRRS is the top one that we have here in the US. That's really what's continues burning the swine industry. But also, I want to highlight the issue of PED. PED is the porcine diarrhea virus that has been a very, very hot topic and a re-emerging issue in the country. So if you follow up with PRRS a little bit, we have here a chart that is color coded by the years when it was detected in those states, and in your right side, a map with dots that represent the number of hog inventory in those states. And you can see that PRRS was the green color in the map represents was here before 2009 and has been spread all over of the country. But when we think about this PRRS, it is a virus. It can evolve, it can mutate, and cause lots of problems. So it did back in 2020, and there was a new emerging of a PRRS virus strain that was named lineage 1C variant. And this chart represents the number of those sequences by year and month. And if you look for that, you can see that there was a wave of detection in the end of 2020, one during the summer of 2021, and another in 2021 for 2022 in the very end of the year. The problem with this is that is a really more aggressive strains for the herds in the first time that you are seeing them, causing lots of abortion, pre-weaning mortality in those herds, and downstream performance of those animals are pretty bad. So caught a lot of attention, is a hot spot in the swine industry. And more recent of this last wave, there was a lot of activity in sow farms. So it means that it's potential that we are going to see more pigs in the downstream that's going to be affected and increase this regional pressure of infection by this agent. So we need to keep an eye on this one because it's a new emerging issue. If you look for the VDL side and taking only ISU data that was provided, there was these bars here where the black one represent the number of distinct premise sites that was detected with this strain, and the red bar, the cumulative number of premise. If you look for where it was these waves in 2021, at the middle of the year and at the end of the year, the number of premise that was affected really increased, means that the virus, this new variant strain, was spreading across different regions. And that was really a more problem for Iowa and Minnesota at that time. But if you look for the recent months of February of 2022 up to 10th of April of 2022, that's a 3-year month lags, we have here a pie chart for the states where it was detected, those strains, with the numbers on top. And you can see that the big pie chart was Iowa with 122 strains. Minnesota was the second one. But what caused attention is that the states of Montana, South Dakota, Nebraska, Colorado, and Missouri had quite a few detections. And if you look for the numbers that are there presented in this arrow, means how many of the total strains detected in those states was detected during the last 3 months. And you can see that there is a lot of activity going on in those states more recently. So it really emerging pathogen that is spreading across different regions now. Another thing that we have in recent time is activity of PD. And this is a chart that monitors detection of this agent over year and week. And the red line is the percentage of positive submissions. So, and the blue line is what we expected for that time. And when you look for 2022, there is a blue band that's a confidence interval. So every time that's above, we say that's more activity, or below, we say that we are doing better. But we can see that went out of control in 2022. So we are really seeing that find opportunities to enter in different channels, different production system and region, and start to spread all over and breaking out biosecurity, by containment practices, and causing a lot of problems in swine industry. So to look at that, we have a chart here that is, these states has more than 2 million hog inventory, so we can monitor by state there. The green color means that the detection for each specific state was according to what was expected for that time of the year. So if we go for February, we start to see activity in Nebraska and Iowa, that is the dark red there. If you go for March, well, Oklahoma turns really red. So we have this hot spot going on, something going on in North Carolina. And now in April, lots of activity going on in those 4 states, plus Kansas and Minnesota start to go for this downside of rot activity. So there is, these are the two agents that are most burning the US swine industry right now. So the highlights that I have here is that this system provides information and updates for what's going on in swine industry in terms of age detection for this submission for these VDLs. You can receive those information by your email for free. Just send an email for the SDRS, istate.edu, and they're going to sign you up. Also, the Swine Health Information Center has these reports that are there updated. We have dashboards online that you can further take more half hour to talk about those things, but let's keep concise here. And currently, PRRS virus, this lineage on C variant strain, PD, are the 2 emerging and re-emerging animal health threats that we have in the swine industry that are occurring. So that are a high-level review, but the point is there is a system that you can get access of what is current going on for this in terms of detection and disease diagnosis in the US. So thank you very much for the opportunity, and happy to take any question. So let me stop sharing here.
Hey, Giovanni, one question. How do symptoms vary between PED-V and PRRS?
They are very, very distinct. If you look for PRRS, it's a respiratory coughing agent in the nurse and finishing side. If you go for the sow farm, you have lots of abortions. That's the main one, pre-weaning mortality in the piglets. And if you look for PED, there is really a lot of diarrhea that goes on in those piglets. And the ones that are the most affected is the newborns. The few first weeks of age are the ones that has the high level of symptoms, high level of mortality. And when they have some being exposure prior, have some immunity in nursery and finishing sites, the effects are less impacted as they are in the during the farrowing phase and when they are suckling piglets.
And are both of those viruses transmitted maternally?
Yes, both can be transmitted from the south to the piglets if they are infected.
Okay.
But I think that's a good point to bring up, and that's probably where Michelle's going to go next with biosecurity. The PRRS is thought to be more aerosol.
Mm-hmm.
So it's nose to nose and aerosol. PEDV you can think of more through the manure because that's a fecal oral, and both it can be in high levels, but PRRS tends to be more aerosol, PEDV more enteric, and thus, as Giovanni said, the clinical signs that way as well. Is that fair, Giovanni?
Yeah, that's correct. I am with you on that.
And so would you find PRRS as much on an outdoor pasture-based farm where you don't have aerosols sort of concentrated inside a building?
Yeah, you can find that.
Yeah.
And there is some good work that was done about demonstrating the way of transmitting PRRS by aerosol transmission. And when you compare with that, this variant that we talked at really has put in a lot of regional pressure of infection, really increasing the number of viral load in those regions and be able to transmit for that. PD, that is the other one, is exactly the point that Tyler mentioned. There is connection between sites, and those are most, can be a truck, can be a farm personnel that has been moving this around and infecting, find an opportunity to enter in one farm that was connected with the other by people or whatever, and start to spread and create this big issue in the swine industry right now.
And we deal with the situation where dose matters. So an immunology or immunity matters, but a large viral dose can overwhelm the immunity. I mean, we saw that in some of the cases with COVID, right?
Yeah.
So what I would say on outdoor is you would tend to have a much less pressure, much less dose pressure, and therefore there's probably less risk, but I would agree with Giovanni that it's not no risk.
Especially, I think, when looking at states like Ohio, where we don't have very many commodity hog operations, but we have smaller level operations that are still pretty big in our universe, and they spend the winter indoors. Like, I think it's not a coincidence that in Q1, where here in the Midwest, this is like, it feels like our third day of sunshine this year. It has been a cold, wet winter, and people are not turning their hogs back out onto pasture because they're going to rip up the pastures because it's a bog out there. And so just because we call ourselves pastured producers, it doesn't mean our hogs are not living indoors in parts of the year with lower stocking densities. But, lower stocking densities for PRRS and an airborne virus is not the kind of hog housing that we're talking about, because they're they're social animals and they'll cluster together kind of no matter what the footprint is. So that's also important to keep in mind. And so what I want to point out to folks is we're talking about a lot of different acronyms today. And if you have questions about acronyms, please, by all means, feel free to ask. But we just looked at the Swine Disease Research Center. I want to bring attention to SHIC, the Swine Health Information Center. When we send out this video, I'm going to provide the PDF, and you'll be able to go to SHIC to look at the viral diseases and the bacterial diseases so that you can get more information on these, because, like, honestly, this is an entire medicine class that you could take that we clearly can't do in an hour's presentation. But so there was the surveillance that Dr. Trevisan was talking about. And then there is the information center where you can get some really super actionable information about what the heck am I seeing? All righty. So then the question becomes, what do we do to mitigate the spread? And I really want to talk about biosecurity here. Okay, because I've been in this game for an awfully long time, and I believe that food safety starts at the farm. So I spend a lot of time doing on-farm food safety and production for food animal medicine, and talk a lot about biosecurity. I have a lot of clients that like all y'all in the audience raise and slaughter their own animals, right? Because we believe in closing the circle. We, all the things that we believe here in pastured production. But that comes with a level of understanding of how to keep your farm safe so that you can keep everybody around you safe and you can keep your own hogs safe, okay? And this is not just something for the big guys, right? Just because you don't have, a whole entire football field of sows giving birth to babies, you have a barn with 20 sows. There's risk in that barn that you have to be aware of and you have to mitigate. You saw those maps, right? Not everybody when I think of large hog producing states, Colorado is not the first state that comes to mind. You know what I mean? And we have a lot of NMPAN members doing producer processor operations in some of those states. I have clients in Oklahoma and he runs 20 hogs, right? And these diseases will be devastating to you as well, and they will hit small producers. So then when we talk about biosecurity, what are the things that we talk about? Okay, we've got all sorts of things going around with the floors, walls, and ceilings and gating and all of that. We've got internal things that we have to talk about. And then one of the emerging issues that we have is your digital infrastructure. So I'm going to be doing, I've got some presentations coming up around vulnerability assessments where I'm really going to be digging into who's doing the good work on our farms for small producers around digital infrastructure security. But what I want to do is I'm going to stop sharing over here and I'm going to share an audit on farm biosecurity. Oops, thought I was at the top. But this is a farm biodefense plan. Okay, I wrote this, I give it away. All right, if you want a copy of this, I think I have the email on the next slide, let me know. But this is the level, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but this is the level of questions I want y'all to be asking yourself, whether you run 2 hogs or 200 hogs or 2,000 hogs, right? Because these are things that you can be doing when you decide to do them. And it starts with the physical security. We look at how are things coming in on the farm. So there was like a big announcement, like a note, maybe not a big announcement, but in our swine veterinarians newsletter today about PEDV and the risks coming in with the feed. Okay. I talk a lot about approved supplier programs. If you have been around me for any length of time, I asked, what do you make? How do you make it? And where do you get your supplies from? And your feed and your feed suppliers and our local regionalized feeding centers, it is of immense importance that you understand how they are mitigating risks at their level, because a lot of the times that's where especially when we're talking about PEDV, that's where we got to address it. But you got to know that you're talking to them, okay? So these are some of the questions that you need to be asking. Who has access to your feed barn? Who has access to your drug locker? Because not everybody needs access to your drug locker. And there was actually the Supreme Court refused to hear the ag-gag appeal from, I think, Kansas. And so ag-gag laws have been determined to be unconstitutional, and you don't have a whole lot of protection as a animal raiser, and you really need to know who's on your farm and who has access to what. And that's all part of your on-farm biosecurity. If you run a processing plant, I have the equivalent of this. It's called a food defense plan, and it has to do with it has a few more questions around like your processing plant versus like a farm and a farm kind of process, right? Feed and water security. Who has access to your water supply? A lot of y'all are in outlying areas, but your water supply is important for an awful lot of reasons, but not the least of which is you've got to be able to understand where your water flows from so that you can protect your animals, not just from diseases, but from other things too. Okay. And we have a little bit about chemicals and information security, but that gives you an idea of the level of granularity around biosecurity that y'all need to be thinking about. So let me know, here's the email if you want the SOP. Let me know if you want that SOP. I give this away. I also give away recall plans. So if you want a recall plan, I'll also send that to you. And because I this stuff is so very important to the economic health of our industry that there's no point in me sitting on the IP, right? So with that, I want to turn it over to my colleagues to talk about the swine health improvement plan. They are going to take it from here, and then we're gonna I'll be monitoring the chat along with Rebecca if you have questions, and then we'll have questions at the end.
Sounds good, Michele. Thank you very much. And hopefully this will make sense as we transition here. But what I wanted to do was spend a little bit of time talking about a new program that's just been piloted and getting started here that Giovanni, Jordan, and I all work on. And it's called the Swine Health Improvement Plan, or US SHIP. And it's modeled after a program that's been in place with the poultry industry since 1935. So just as Michele talked about the importance of knowing the different diseases, and obviously our goal would be to keep those diseases out, well, we look at the US swine population overall and we say, do we really have a plan that covers everybody? And the answer, quite honestly, is no. We have state plans, we have individual farm plans. So this effort that I'm going to describe here in the last few minutes attempts to take the industry, and that includes producers like yourselves and processors like yourselves, state animal health officials, and federal, meaning USDA officials, and saying, hey, how can we coordinate better to do a better job with diseases? Our initial effort is focused on ASF and CSF, so African swine fever and classical swine fever, the first two diseases that Michele covered. But everything we talk about would be relevant to other diseases like PRRS, like PED. So I wanted to just start by saying the biosecurity that Michele just covered is vitally important. And we basically look at our program, this national playbook for health, as having three technical pillars. And biosecurity is certainly one of those. The other two would be traceability, where are those pigs moving to and from, and also sampling and testing or surveillance to make sure that we know what is or isn't there. So we look at this program as trying to tie in all three of these technical areas. I've got a lot of information on this slide, but some of you may be aware of the Secure Pork Supply Plan that's being supported by the National Pork Board. And that has some biosecurity information, just like what Michele described. There's also a program called AgView that's being used to try to help with animal movements. And then in the case of a foreign animal disease, which would be highly detrimental to our industry, we need to know where that disease is, and we need to be able to sample and test. And there's a program called Certified Sampler Program that would be accredited veterinarians training producers to take their own samples so that we can cover as much of the industry as quickly as possible if we needed to. So This just gives you an overview of all of the technical things that are in this US SHIP program. Now I just want to kind of describe a little bit of the organization of it. First, again, this is attempting to put together a national playbook. And only with a national playbook will we really be able to defend or to respond to a foreign animal disease. I think everybody's fully aware that a foreign animal disease will basically take away our international trade. That impacts all of us, whether we raise 1 pig or we raise 1,000 pigs, because 30% of our pigs are exported today. And whether you export or not, the price of pork will go down dramatically if we get a foreign animal disease. So about 1.5 years ago, the USDA said, hey, let's put together a pilot and see if we can make a program like what they've got on the poultry side. The poultry, it's called National Poultry Improvement Plan. And as I said, it's been in place since 1935. We are trying to put together a similar program modeled after NPIP for swine. Our first and most important focus is on the prevention of ASF and CSF, but we're also working towards, if we were to get that, either one of those diseases, can we demonstrate with confidence where that disease is not? And that's important, obviously, for movement of animals and eventually for international trade. So the way this US SHIP program works, it's modeled after what it is in the poultry. You as producers and packers in the upper left here would participate in the program. We come together as a House of Delegates once a year, and I'll talk about that in just a little more detail. But that's where state animal health officials, USDA, as well as you, the producers and packers, would be together and basically come up, agree as a group, vote on what standards or requirements we would have for biosecurity, traceability, and surveillance. And then that's administered, this program will be administered in a similar way as to NPIP, which it's administered at the state level. And I'll cover that just briefly as well. So we already had our first House of Delegates meeting last year in August. We hosted it in Des Moines, and we had 27 states, which I'll show here in a minute, that expressed interest in participating. So they sent delegates, and we asked them to send delegates that represented the entire spectrum of the US swine industry, small producers as well as large producers, packers, and we had some folks that would represent the live animal marketing channels as well. Our focus, as I said initially, is on the foreign animal disease of ASF and CSF, and that's to prevent, then respond, and then recover if we were to get it. But it's also building the framework that we would basically have things in place that would help improve or reduce our endemic diseases like PRRS, like PED that we mentioned earlier. And so essentially our efforts are to say, hey, is this a good experience? Is this a good program that we should develop for the US swine industry? Just real quick on foreign animal disease, if we were to get one, ASF or CSF, there's very clear response from the USDA and the state on what we would do. And so that upper left shows the red book or the preparedness and response plan should we get an ASF incursion or outbreak. They will create control zones, which there will be no movement within those control zones or even within the buffer zone unless they're released by the state animal health official. Nationally, we'll have at least a 3-day stop movement in order to try to understand where is that disease. In conjunction with the red book, there's also secure pork supply that some states will use to understand, hey, do they have good biosecurity processes in place, like what Michele described, such that I have comfort that they would not have gotten spread from this infected zone. So those things are in place. But what's not in place without US SHIP is what about the rest of the country? And so we need to be able to demonstrate freedom of disease on your farms in the case of an outbreak so that you can continue to have business. So that's a big focus for the US SHIP program. These are the states that have initially expressed interest. So you can see it's many, not all, but many of the states that raise swine. And if you totaled up the population of swine in these 28 states, it would be 99.5% of the pigs in the US. We are certainly open to enrolling the remaining states, but we wanted to start somewhere. In our initial pilot expectations were 10 to 15 states would participate, and we're already at 28. So there's a lot of interest in the program. This is a slide that the state of Iowa, the Iowa Pork Association, has already put together that says, well, what's required to be in SHIP? And I thought it was pretty good how they animated the parts of the pig, but basically you need to have a premise ID so that we know where the farm's located. Need to have an active veterinary client-patient relationship. So Michele mentioned, hey, if you don't have a veterinarian, get one, because that's going to be important in the case of a foreign animal disease. There is not garbage or swill feeding allowed with our program. And that sounds pretty strict, and yet in areas of Europe and Asia, it's well documented that that's how ASF, for example, has been spread. And so we've said to be in this program, no garbage or swill feeding is allowed. If you were to go to an international country or have visitors from a country that is ASF or CSF positive, we would have at least a 5-day downtime to hopefully minimize any contact with the virus. There is a biosecurity survey that's put together that you would fill out in order to enroll, and that's online. Fairly brief, about 10 questions, but just helps us to better understand what your biosecurity practices are. And that's not used at the site level. That's aggregated across all of the sites. And so far, we've got about 3,000 sites in that survey to better inform us about practices of feeding. Michele mentioned the importance of feed biosafety, for example. Gives us better information about exposure to feral pigs and things like that. So there's a biosecurity survey. There is the requirement to share movement data, and that's not on an ongoing basis, but that's just to be able to share with your state animal health official that you can give 30 days of movement data. And then finally, there will be no sampling or testing in this first year, and likely won't be in the second year for ASF or CSF. But what we may have is that we ask that you show proficiency in sampling if surveillance is needed down the road. So I'll just finish up here. Looks like we're getting close to our time, and we want to leave time for Q&A. This is a voluntary program. Your responsibilities would be to meet or exceed those requirements I just walked through. And it's important to know that the certifying agency modeled after the poultry program is at the state level. So whatever state you have your premise in, that's the state that you would actually enroll with US SHIP. Why should you participate? Well, obviously it's intended to improve our preparedness for ASF and CSF and hopefully help us continue to prevent its occurrence on our continent. As I mentioned, it's to demonstrate the freedom of disease if we were to get either of those diseases. That will help streamline interstate movements between certified sites. It helps the nation, and this is at the USDA level, to help build a plan towards resumption of international trade if we were to get one of those diseases. And basically, as I mentioned, it'll help improve the national health of our industry. So it provides a national playbook. Enrollment is reaching out to your official state agency and doing those steps that I just described. And I know we're nearly out of time, but I just wanted to let Jordan quickly describe the website that we've got, and that will allow you to see where you can get further enrollment data and also the biosecurity survey. So I'll turn it over to Jordan.
Perfect. So just quick, I've just put the link in the chat. So if you guys want to go there, you can learn more information. I just want to highlight a couple tabs for you. Tyler just covered a lot of information, and you'll see this About tab here covers a lot of that stuff that we already went through. The Overview tab is going to be the most concise way to kind of walk through that information if that's of interest to you. The next tab that I want to highlight is this Enroll and Certify tab. And so this tab here really just walks through, what is enrollment? What is certification? What does that look like for you as a producer or a processor? Additionally, we have this PDF document here that gives you the contact information for the official state agency in your state. So if you have production in Colorado, you will go to Colorado, find the contact, and you can reach out to them to learn more about enrollment in the state of Colorado. We also have a Committees tab, which really just quickly walks through those 3 pillars: the biosecurity, sampling and testing, and traceability. And certainly if there's any of you that would like to be on any of those working groups, please don't hesitate to get a hold of us and let us know. The Documents tab here has all of the program documents that are associated with US SHIP. So we have these 2 informational booklets that are really helpful, giving kind of a concise version of what US SHIP is. And then the last tab that I'll highlight just quickly is the Contact tab. So again, you'll find that PDF here for the official state agencies. But certainly if you have any other questions related to US SHIP, Tyler, Giovanni, and I's contact information is all here. So that's kind of a very quick overview, but I want to be cognizant of time and be able to answer you guys' questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Jordan. I have a question for you. Why would a processor want to enroll in this?
I'll take a first swing at that. Ultimately, as we look at the foreign animal diseases, those will shut down international trade. And so we've probably all walked through that. There's a minimum of a 72-hour shutdown, no movement. That won't open up until it'll be opened up on a state-by-state basis based upon confidence of demonstrating the freedom of the disease. And then that'll be contained down to control zones. At the packer processor level, it's important that you know what your supply chain, the status of your supply chain. And so we've gotten a lot of interest from the packing community to say, well, for the procurement that I'm bringing in for my pork, I want to know the status of their sites. And so they're encouraging enrollment of the producers so that you have a picture of the supply chain. So ultimately, in the use of it for foreign animal disease, which is what we're initially focused on, Rebecca, it is about the supply chain. Now, the use for endemic diseases like PRRS and PED, packer processor may not be quite so interested, although healthy pigs make healthy pork. But for a foreign animal disease, it's very important at the supply chain level. That'd be my 2 cents. And Michele, Jordan, Giovanni, if you've got further comments there.
Well,
I would just add to that one of the things that, doing these like House of Delegates and being involved with your local pork processing organization, whatever it is, especially coming out of coronavirus, like it gives you access to peers going through the same thing that you are, who know different things than and the sharing, the way, if you look at best practices, when we are battling, whether it's human-based pandemic disease or animal-based pandemic disease, one of our best practices is information sharing and getting information quickly to people who might not quite know yet that they need it or who really do need it. And so that's like the networking aspect and the human interaction aspect of this is not to be underestimated, because it is often the fastest way that we get information to where we need it to control what we need to control.
Well, a lot of processors we work with are small and mid-scale who aren't exporting pork. And in many cases, they're not even owning the animals. They're just doing fee-for-service processing. Is this still something they should consider joining if that is their business model?
Yeah, so I emphasize exports a lot, but there's also going to be the whole issue of interstate movement and just movement of pigs. And so it kind of builds in that manner, meaning, well, really the first step is, can we even move our pigs? Can we demonstrate we're not in a control zone? Can we demonstrate that where we're at, that there isn't a risk so that we can move pigs? And I would say it's even more important when you don't own the pigs, because then you have, what information do you have about that source of pigs? And so this is a program that offers that as information so that you can move your pigs interstate, regardless of whether you have international trade.
I have a few more questions, and then of course the audience can pop questions into the Q&A. A lot of small processors deal with fair animals, and I think fairs are sort of a petri dish of disease spreading. So Michele, what are your thoughts about how folks can protect themselves if they're bringing animals to fairs?
So the first thing that they can do is we have had shutdowns before of animals going to fairs. We had, I think in our first HPAI outbreak a couple of years ago, they shut down all the bird shows. So being really in touch with the organizing entities at your fairs is the first thing. Again, it goes back to information. And then the second thing is making sure that when you're going to and from the fair, so we're dropping animals off, we're, the 4-H kids are hanging out and blow drying their animals. We are not sharing utensils. We're not sharing brushes. We're not sharing blow dryers. We're not sharing, nippers and picks and the bits and bobs that go in your box for your shows. Right, that there is adequate space with the animals when they're being housed and when they're being shown, and those sorts of practices that we can do. But the fairs, and I don't know if you guys want to pop in on this, you're right. I mean, they are a petri dish, but they're also a really good place where we can disseminate information and teach people how to do these good biosecurity practices.
Jordan, do you want to comment? I mean, she works full time with us in diagnostic lab, but she also has a few show pigs. So any further comments from your side, Jordan?
Yeah, so I probably fit in more with you guys than I do in the job that I currently have. My husband and I have 2 sows, and we raise show pigs for our kiddos. And so kind of our best practice is, a lot of the things that have already been said, but if you have the opportunity or the space when you bring your pigs home from a show, giving them, minimally 7 days, but that 14 to 21 day window before you're going to mix them back in with your pigs that are already on your farm. So for us, we have a lot of outdoor production, and then we have an indoor space. We tend to keep those pigs more outdoors, away from our pigs that we didn't take to show, just to be able to say okay, we can watch for symptoms of disease, and it protects the pigs that we have already at home.
And that was, how long was the quarantine again? 14 to 21 days or?
That is what they say would be best practice. Obviously, the more you can extend that out, the better, but that's not always feasible. And I understand that from a standpoint, but being sure that you have a few days at least of downtime to be able to watch for any symptoms of disease.
Mm-hmm.
Longer is always better, but you also have to be feasible. So I'd agree with Jordan, whether that's 7, 14 days, if you can do that. Longer is better, but don't not do it because you think you can't do 3 or 4 weeks. because the incubation time for these diseases varies. But they're not necessarily going to show up in the first 24 or 48 hours.
And what are some best practices for processors who are taking in lots of pigs from different producers, putting them into their holding pens and running them through slaughter? What are some best practices in terms of sanitizing those holding pens that will actually kill these viruses?
Jordan, you want to go through what you guys do? Or Michele, I guess you've got your standard operating procedures.
I'm gonna let Michele take this one. That's more her wheelhouse.
Okay, so fair's over. We, the 4-H kids got all their college money, right? And we've gotten all our points to go get our judging scholarships and stuff like that, right? And so now it's time for the hogs to have one bad day. And so then the best practices is one, appointments, knowing where those animals have been when they're going to the processors. Okay, so being super organized about that part of it and confirming who's coming when and sequencing them. Okay, so and not having the wrong person show up at the wrong time. Okay, so that's because again, one of the legs of the stool that we're talking about is traceability. Okay, so then you're going to run everybody in. You still got to keep track of everybody. Yeah, right. And so how are you sequencing the hogs as they're coming through so you can maintain traceability and understand which hog it's for business reasons, if nothing else. The person who bought Jenny's hog better get Jenny's hog. Right. So keeping really good track of that with your traceability software or process or whatever you have, it doesn't have to be software, right? And then what I highly recommend is we do all in, all out. Okay, and you really pay attention to your sanitizing, right? And so sanitizing is, of course, 2 steps. It's cleaning with soap, water, and elbow grease, right? And leaving the soap, I swear to God, this is going on my tombstone. Soap stays on a surface that an animal has come into contact with for 7 to 12 minutes. And I want y'all to take your phone and to time it. Okay, because most people have no idea how long 7 minutes is while you're watching soap. It is the longest 7 to 12 minutes of your life, right? So you're going to wash everything down, including your feeders and your waterers, all those, like good footing is essential to one bad day. And one of the reasons good footing is essential to one bad day is because you need to have cleanable footing for animals, so that we're not communicating diseases where people walk. Okay, and so cleaning 7 to 12 minutes, rinsing with water, right? And then if you choose to use the sanitizer in your penning system, in the middle of an outbreak, I have to tell you, it's just that one extra step, right, of the spraying everything down with bleach, letting it sit there, okay? And then making sure that the trucks that are coming on are not communicating with each other. People are using footwear in like booties and that sort of thing. And then those are not then blowing all over hither and yon. That defeats the purpose of the, garbage cans with covers is super ideal.
So boot covers that they only use on site and they dispose of when they leave. Yeah, all that good stuff. Okay, great. Were there any more questions from the audience? We have a minute left.
Rebecca, I did answer one question, which was if your state does not have an OSA or is not currently participating, can you participate? The answer is no, but please let us know which states you would have interest in, which state you're in, and we're happy to reach out or try to get that set up.
Yeah, absolutely. And they can certainly follow the best practices and protocols from the website, right? Even if they're not an enrolled state, correct?
Sure. The more that we get enrollment and more states, the more that this will be a national playbook. So we would encourage enrollment, but let us know if your state's not participating, and we can follow up.
All right. Any last words from our panelists today?
I just want to say thank you to my colleagues for doing this. I know we put this together like in 15 minutes after the American Association of Swine Vets conference. And it just, I think, goes to show you the level of collegiality that we have across the industry so that we can do this work because it's important work. I'm so happy that we got this together. And I thank you so much, everybody, both the attendees who showed up, people who asked questions, and we're always available for follow-up because this is what we believe in.
Awesome. Well, I'll send the PDF of Michelle's slides to everyone who registered, as well as the links that we talked about today. And we'll post the replay on the NPAN YouTube channel, where you'll also find hundreds of other great videos. And we greatly appreciate your time, and have a wonderful day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.